So Jim, what was the first car you ever worked on?
Well, it was a 41 Ford Coupe that was my brother's. And of course, like anyone that's turning 16, I wanted to drive. And he said he'd give me the car, but it had a bad motor in it. And then when I was done with it, he wanted it back. And it had a bad motor in it. And so my dad went up to the Ford garage and bought me a motor for it for $158, which in today's money, I don't know what that would be. But at any rate, he got the motor for me and he says, well, there's the car and there's the engine. You'll have to figure it out yourself. So I asked a neighbor of mine that had a big old tree out there with a limb on it if I could work on it under that tree. It had a big limb that I could put a chain come along on it. And so I pulled the engine out and transferred all the parts and got it running myself. So that was my first car. And of course, I always loved cars and motorcycles and everything. So that's the start right there.
And what a great start. So my next question is, Jim, you've been working on cars for over 60 years, and you've been a public mechanic for over 40. What was it that really made you get into working on cars?
Well, I think it's just because as I started out, I loved cars, motorcycles, and anything like that. And so I just liked it, and then I got a job when I was a senior in high school. I got a job at a service station. Of course, I was around cars then, and I learned an awful lot. And that's how I actually got into it. And, I just liked it. And so I got into it then when I was young, worked a lot of hours when I was a senior in high school, and always kind of knew my way around cars. And so that's how I got started, and I got lucky, and I drove a 2-year-old car when I was a senior in high school because I was working at a station for a lot of hours and making $1 an hour, and I had enough money to buy a 2-year-old car and make the payments on it and buy my own insurance. And of course, this was back in 1963 when prices and gas and everything was so much cheaper. But from then on, it's history because I just started with that, and when you find something that you like, you just stay with it.
And that's great. My next question, Jim, you used to own a local mechanic store over here in Hartville called Jim's Auto Care. Can you walk me through how you started your business?
Well, I was working in a service station, and then when I turned a little bit before I turned 20, I got a draft notice, and I got drafted, and the guy I worked for said that after I got out of the service, I served from 65 to 71. It was 2 years active service, 2 years active reserve, and 2 years inactive reserve. So I got my job back with him when I got out of the service, and I worked there for 10 years, and then my brother told me about a place in Hartville that the guy wanted to retire and getting up for a lease and everything. And so I decided in 1977 to go into it myself. And I had already worked for him for 10 years and had a lot of experience working with the public and stuff like that. So that's how I got into it.
And how did Jim's Auto Care become Jim's Auto Care after you bought that station?
Well, just the first couple of years, it was an Amoco station. I took over, it was an Amoco station. And so I called it Jim's Amoco. And I called it that way for just a few years. And then I changed the name to Jim's Auto Care because there really wasn't much money in gas, and I was making most of mine in repair work. So I decided to change the name even while I was still an Amoco to Jim's Auto Care. I just, it still had Amoco on the sign at that time, but then I changed it to Jim's Auto Care, and it's been Jim's Auto Care ever since. Actually, I went out of the gas business in 1996 and just worked on cars after that. And then the guy that ended up with it, I actually sold it in 2008 to two young men when I was in my 60s. And they had a 5-year lease with an option to buy. One of them passed away, and then the other one didn't want to do it. So I took it back. in 2013 for just a short period of time. And the fellow that has it today, he took over and then he run it. And then in 2016, he decided to buy it and he bought it. But it still says Jim's Auto Care. So he kept the name the same and the phone number the same. Still the same phone number as it was in 1977.
And I also want to thank you for your service. So when you got drafted to Vietnam, what did you do and what was it like?
Well, you know, when I got drafted, you go through basic training and everything, and you're supposed to put down what you want to do. And I liked working on stuff, so I put down that I wanted to be a mechanic and work in the motor pool, you know, for the Army, because I kind of knew my way around vehicles. And of course, in the Army's good judgment, they decided instead of that, they were going to send me through 26 weeks of electronics training to learn how to be a radio repairman for the Army. So when I got to, it was over a year. It took over a year by the time I went to school. When I got back from there, sent up to a shop after I got done working, I'm getting ahead of myself. I worked in a shop for 3 months, and then they shipped me to Vietnam. And there was only me and one other guy in the whole company that were field radio repairmen. But it didn't take them long to figure out I knew my way around vehicles. So the whole time I was over there, that's what I did. I didn't hardly ever see a radio. So I went through all that schooling, which I think helped me later. It was electronics type schooling. So that was my experience. I was in 2 years, and then 2 years active reserve, and then 2 years inactive, and got my full discharge then in 1971.
And is it true that you got a sharpshooter award during that time?
Oh yeah, I was kind of mad at myself because I got a expert rifleman, and then when I got the expert rifleman, I thought, boy, what a dummy! They're going to put you out. They're going to put you out and make you a sniper or something like that. And I didn't really want to do that. But yeah, I got the expert rifleman, stuff like that. Then I was only a first year of private. Then you're a corporal, and then I was only corporal for like 3 months, and I got promoted to E5. So then I was a specialist 5th class, and that's the rank I was when I got out.
Well, moving on, Jim, you own a property over in Pennsylvania that you built by yourself. Can you tell me how that happened?
Well, actually, my brother had a guy working with him at the Monarch Rubber Company that had a place over there, and he was telling my brother about it. My brother and I took a trip over there in 1970, and there was these 4 lots together, and he bought 2 of them, and I bought 2 of them. And the first few years there, I bought an old trailer and fixed it up and to stay in. And then after a few years, I think it was in the late 70s, I went into business in 77, but it was right at that time, or maybe in the early 80s. I can't quite remember exactly, but that's when I built the cabin. And the rest is history. I built the cabin and later on added some sheds and stuff. And I actually don't own it. You say I owned it, but I don't own it. In 2004, I turned it over to my kids because in case something happened to me, I didn't want them to have to go through probate court in Pennsylvania and in Ohio. So I gave it to them in 2004 with the stipulation that when Papa shows up, that bed up there and upstairs is mine. And they agreed to that. So I do a lot of the work on there. I'm the one that maintains it a lot, but I actually don't own it anymore. My kids own it, but they still say it's my cabin.
And what was the process like building? Like costs, material?
I bought a lot of the lumber here and hauled it over there. I can remember buying studs, 2x4 studs for 79 cents a piece. And I would buy, if I needed 40 of them, I'd buy 55 of them or so I'd have extras because some of them maybe were twisted or whatever, but I just started and I drawed up the plans, and I had a nephew of mine come over one time and he helped me dig the holes for the post. We built it on post up off the ground. And then another weekend I draw all the material over there, and I built the floor in one weekend because I was still working, so I had to do it basically Saturday and Sunday. So I built the floor one weekend, then I covered it with plastic so that it would keep the rain off of the new wood. And then I would come back probably every weekend, and I would work on it a little bit. You know, I'd work on it a little bit and start putting it up and stuff like that. So I think all in all, it took me about maybe 6 months, maybe not even that. I can't remember now because it's been so many years, but I think when I got it done, I didn't have much over about $1,500 in it with all the material and stuff that I did myself.
That's a lot. I mean, in today's world, I don't think that could happen.
No, it's worth a lot more now than it was when I built it.
Speaking of in today's world, Jim, you are 79 years old and you still get around so well. You do things around the house. I mean, you do things that, quite frankly, I think a lot of people don't think they could do at your age. What's your secret?
I don't know that it's a secret. I just have always felt I worked hard my whole life. And when you retire, I like to keep myself doing something, whether it's working outside on my property or working on my own cars or working on my grandchildren's cars. Because after I retired, some of my grandchildren, they had a special phone number. It was called 1-800-PAPA. So when their cars didn't work, it was 1-800-PAPA. And then, of course, I loved doing it because that's what I did my whole life. So at any rate, that's I keep myself busy. If any of my children have anything that they need done, and if I'm able to do it, I still enjoy doing it.
Wow. I mean, it's inspiring.
Right.
So, Jim, you have fully restored a 1955 and a 1969 Chevy. Can you walk me through the process on how you found them and what you did to make them?
Well, when my son was, I can't quite remember, maybe 13, 14, in that area, I kind of decided I was going to look for a car to restore because I felt, and I had a 1967 SS 396 Chevelle when I was young. And so I found this 69 396 Chevelle that was in terrible shape. It needed all new fenders and the motor needed rebuilt and everything. So I bought it and took it home in the garage. I lived in Uniontown. And I wanted my son interested in it. I thought it was good for him to get interested in something like that when he turned 16 instead of maybe out running around, you know. So I started it with the idea of building it with him in mind, you know what I mean? So he's got a film of it. He filmed the whole thing from start to finish, me taking the motor out and working on the motor and stuff like that. And then I did a lot of the body work on it and everything. And then when we got it over to service station, later in years, I hired a guy to work on body work and stuff, because I had a lot of customers that says, "Hey, Jim, where can I go to get this fender fixed? Am I banged on my who can do it?" And I was always sending them somewhere else. So I decided, I knew a guy that I went to school with, and he had worked for a body shop for a long time. And so I ended up hiring him, and he's the one that painted the car. And then later on, we actually built another building in the back of the thing for him to work on cars, body stuff back there.
Wow. Well, Jim, I appreciate you answering all those questions.
Oh, that's fine.
Thank you so much
That's fine.
for talking to me here today.
Thank you. Thank you.